Hi, welcome to my channel to Irrational. I'm Pranay Sharma, and in this video we are going to solve CS1 paper B conducted by IFoA in September 2021. If you want the complete solutions for CS1 paper A as well as B, please WhatsApp or Telegram your email ID to the number given below and we are going to email you the same. So let's get started. Let's read question number 1. In a small country, a political election was held recently to decide on a political party to govern the country. A survey was conducted to monitor the approval rating for the winning political party. A sample of 15 voters were asked to complete the same survey twice, once before the election and the second time 6 months after the election. The survey asked each of the 15 voters to record their approval for the winning political party on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 strongly disapprove and 10 is strongly approve. The results are shown in the table below. So we have these values given to us. We can directly copy and paste them. And let's see. First question. We have calculated the mean for the approval before and approval after the result. Outline why Kendall's tau would be a suitable correlation coefficient to use for these results, and then calculate the Kendall's tau coefficient between the approval before and approval after result, and comment on your result in part 1 and part 3. Now to solve, we'll just copy these two codes and paste it in our RStudio, and then for mean we'll just take it as, so I'll just run this, and for mean we will take mean function. For the second one also mean function, and these are the values that we are getting. We'll talk about the comments in a minute. And for correlation coefficient, COR is our function, so we'll have approval before, approval after, and method we'll take it as Kendall. So these are the values that we see. So we can see that mean approval before was 7.2. So averagely we had a good approval, whereas mean approval after became small. So clearly the approval has gone down, and correlation is very small. So that means not everybody who was approving before had the similar experience afterwards. So for the second part, they are asking us why Kendall's rank correlation might be a good fit here. So Kendall's rank correlation measures if the changes in the value of X is in the same direction of that in Y by taking the two pairs at a time. This gives us a better idea about the relative increase or decrease in the popularity. So whether the same people's approval has gone up or whether the approval has gone down, this is what our Kendall's rank correlation is going to give us. So this gives us an idea about whether all of the people have similar experience, has increased their approval, or whether they have decreased their approval. If somebody was at, let's say, approval 4, increased it to 6, then a person with approval 6 increased it to 8. This is what our relative increase we are seeing, or whether we have a relative decrease, that is what we are seeing here. But because the correlation coefficient is very small, and here see, we could see that average approval at the beginning was more than average approval that we see now. So using this, we will comment in the fourth part. From the mean in part 1, we can say overall approval rating has significantly decreased. The correlation coefficient is very low. This suggests we do not have similar spread in people's approval rating after as it was before. The overall rating decreased but not proportional to the rating before. That means the people who had high rating before, they have now very low rating or maybe higher rating than before, and people who had low rating, either they have now high rating or a very low rating. They are not in the same direction. That is what we are trying to comment here. Now let's read question number 2. Use the command set.seed 2021 to initialize the random number generator. When you execute any R code in this question, make sure you run the entire R script, including the line set.seed 2021 at the start. First part, they are asking us to generate a sample of size 180 from an exponential distribution with parameter 5. Calculate the sample median of the sample in part 1a. Calculate the median of the exponential distribution with with lambda 5, and comment on your result in part 1b and 1c. For the second question, first we are going to put our set.seed. Then we will take a sample from exponential distribution. So R exp 180 is the size of our sample. Then the parameter is 5. We'll just run this. Then to find median, you'll just use the median function. And we are getting 0.1463199. And to find our median of exponential distribution with parameter as 5, you can either use your capital F of m is 0.5, that can rearrange and get you that your median is going to be minus log of 0.5 by 5. So that gives us this value. Or you could directly take q of exp at 0.5, because median is the value that divides our population in 0.5. So you could have done it this way as well, no problem. You will get exactly the same answer. For the D1, we have to comment on these two. So you would say they are nearly the same. Okay, 0.146 and 0.38, they are nearly the same. Therefore, you would say that the sample is following an exponential distribution. Or you could say the difference is due to the sample being small, or for a particular sample we have taken the values are slightly different from each other. So many things you could have commented, and I think all of them would be correct. For the second part, they are saying the maximum likelihood estimator for lambda is given by lambda hat being 1 by x bar, where x bar is the sample mean. Second part, A, estimate the parameter lambda using the maximum likelihood estimator and the sample in part 1a. So we have to use our sample that we have created before to now calculate our lambda. Generate another sample of size n is equals to 180 from an exponential distribution with the parameter lambda is equals to 5. So another distribution we need to create, and estimate the parameter lambda using the maximum likelihood estimator and the new sample. Comment on the estimated value in part 2a and 2b. So for the first part, we'll just take 1 by mean of the sample. So if I run this is the value that we'll get, 4.66. So it's nearly 5. Of course, it's different, but you can say it is because of a specific sample and the sample being small. For the second one, we'll take the same thing, SAM2, and we'll create it from our random sample REXP 180, 5, and we'll do again 1 by mean of that. So it is 5.25. So you can see the variation is nearly 5. So your answer would be both are nearly 5. The variation is due to the different samples taken into account and sample being not very large. Now let's read question number 3. An insurer's marketing team has developed a new lottery that gives each new customer the chance to win a cash prize. The insurer states that any new customer can win with probability 0.636 independently of all other customers. Let Y denote the number of winning in a random sample of 900 new customers. State a suitable distribution for the random variable Y. Clearly, it's going to be a binomial distribution. Right? Calculate to 4 decimal places the probability that it is between k and k plus 20 for all values, k being 220, 240, 260 till 400. So k has values difference of 20 in each one of them. So here first we are writing our Y follows binomial distribution 900, 0.36. Next we will be making our k value, that is a sequence from 220 to 400 with the difference of 20. Then for probability we are going to use p binom function. P binom from, we'll have k20, this is our parameters, again minus k, because k is not included in the probability, whereas k plus 20 is included in the probability. Then we have to round it up to 4 decimal places. So I have made a separate function for round and I have named it in P1. So this is our values. I can run and show you. For the third part, they are saying it is suggested that the true distribution of y can be approximated with a normal distribution with the expectation of 324 and a standard deviation of 14.4. So we are talking about our CLT. Calculate to 4 decimal places the probability that y is going to be between these two values for all the values between, again, the same values. So k is going to be same. We are going to use normal approximation, so we have to use continuity correction. If you do not use continuity correction, I don't think you are going to get marks anywhere from 3 to 5. Then for the fourth part, they are asking us plot the values calculated in part 2 and 3 on the same graph. And hint, you may find the R command lines useful. Now lines is only used when there is already a plot present. If there is not a plot present, we cannot directly use lines. But we can use curves to make a particular plot. We can use a blank plot. I'll show you both those ways. Then they're asking us to discuss your answer in part 1 to 4. So first, for the 3, I have directly done now round function, or P for normal distribution, k plus 20.5 because we are doing continuity correction as well, and here we have k plus 0.5 again because of continuity correction, and rounded off to 4 decimal places, and this is the values that we are getting. Now when we are trying to build a plot, let me first run these two. Now when we are trying to build a plot, a blank plot, we don't know what would be our x limits and what would be our y limits and what would be our x limits. So we'll have to specify those. Now if I'm building it from curve, I can actually give the values of x. Now it should be in terms of a function of x. So I have to write here a certain function that has the value x in it. So therefore I have written 0 into x so that I get a blank plot. 0 into x, I will have a straight line on the bottom. Then the limits of x, that would be 220 to 400, and the length of k is the number of values that I am going to get. That is these many different values, 20 values, whatever number of values that I have here, that is the number of values that I am taking here for x. Then I have specified by my y limit. Otherwise what happens is it will literally make a plot that will not have any height in it. So I want height, so therefore I have specified my y limit values and then specified the labels of x and y. So now I'll run this curve and you can see I get a sort of a blank plot with my y-axis values from 0 to 0.5. How did I figure that out? So you can see here 0.47, 0.46, these are the maximum values. So clearly 0.5 is a good point where I should stop my y limit. Now after using this blank plot, what I can do is I can use the lines function to create these 0.1 and 0.2 or probability 1 and probability 2 lines. We'll run these two, and these are basically coinciding, right? They are so similar that there is almost no difference between the plots. Okay. Now this plot can be created in another way. You could create a blank plot first and then use those lines to actually create this plot. So for blank plot, you will just say plot null value. Okay. So again, if you just give plot null value, it needs to know how big of a plot to create. So therefore I have to give the limits of x-axis, limits of y-axis, then accordingly the values, label and stuff. I'll just plot this and you can see now I have a blank plot. And then I will use the same lines command to plot these lines. So now I get my plot. Now for the comment, we'll just say as the sample size is large, 900 is a very large sample size, right? The probability of success is relatively not small, because 0.36 is not very small. You can multiply 900 into 0.36 and see that will be definitely be greater than 5. Hence, the normal distribution is a good approximation to binomial distribution. Continuity correction is important here as we are converting discrete to continuous. The relative probabilities calculated in part 2 and part 3 are almost the same, and we can see that in the plot where lines are almost overlapping. I have not written anything here, but you can say this shows that a normal approximation is a good approximation for this binomial distribution. Let's read question number 4. An actuarial modeler in a health insurance company is consulting a generalized linear model to analyze claim numbers for its critical illness policy. For every policy over the past year, the company has collected the number of reported claims, that is our claim number, and the data on the following covariates. So we have age, gender, region, pre-existing conditions. Now see here they have said age is between 18 to 80. Gender is given as male or female. The region is a description of the region where the policyholder lives, and pre-existing condition, a categorical value representing whether the policyholder has a pre-existing condition, 0 as no and 1 as yes. The data given in the file named claim_experience.r data show the past year's reported claim for this company's critical illness policy. After loading the data into the R using the command load this, and the data frame data_claims with its variable listed above will be available. You don't actually need to use that load command. You can just go to the file, right click, open with, and directly RStudio and click yes, and here you will have all your data. Okay, data_claims, 5000 observations, 6 variables, everything we have available here. Let's read the question further. The modeler wants to fit a GLM with the claim_number as the response variable and is deciding whether to fit the GLM using a Poisson or a normal distribution. Fit a GLM using a normal distribution and treat age as a numerical variable and the remaining 3 covariates as factors, calling this model_G. Now see here, gender and region is already given as factors. You don't have to do anything, but for pre-existing health condition you have to create it as a factor because it is given as a numerical value. You have to convert it into factor. Then we know we have to use a normal distribution, model_G, and there is no special relationship given in between any of these variates, so we will assume that they are all independent, and we will fit our relationship. So here we have model_G is equals to GLM, family is going to be Gaussian, and you can see I have taken claim_number, follows age plus gender plus region plus factor as our pre-existing condition. Okay, I'll just run this. They have asked us to show the coefficients and stuff, so summary, and then I've just written the coefficient stuff. You can write all of the complete summary, that works too, no problem. Here I have just taken the coefficient, no problem. So we have our estimates, standard deviation, t-value, and our p-value. For the second part, they are saying fit a GLM using the Poisson distribution that treats age as numerical variable and the remaining 3 covariates as factor, calling this model_P. So the only thing we have to change is that from family from Gaussian to Poisson. Okay, your answer should include the estimated value, standard error, and p-value of each of these parameters. Again, summary works, no problem, but you can take summary $coefficient as well. Then they are saying justify which model the modeler should use using your answer to part 1 and 2a. So you can use the AIC number to determine that, but here because they just asked us to take estimated value, standard error and p-value, I use that to figure out which model is better, but you can definitely use the AIC number too. Then comment on the dependency of the number of reported claims on the pre-existing condition, health condition based on your answer part 2 and part 2b. So for the second one, we have made our model. The only difference is family is now Poisson, and exactly the same way I'm calculating the coefficients. So if we just compare the p-values of the normal distributions and of the Poisson distribution, so most of them are better in terms of the Poisson distribution. So they are nearly the same, but Poisson distributions are slightly better than that of normal distribution. That is what you will be saying in part 2a. And you can check the AIC number, as I have told you, AIC number for P distribution, for Poisson distribution is less than that for normal distribution. And they have also asked us to see the significance of pre-existing health condition. Here also we have a very small p-value, and even in normal distribution we have a very small p-value. That suggests that in both cases the pre-existing condition is significant or highly significant in terms of our claim numbers. For the next part, the modeler has fitted the GLM using a Poisson distribution and now wants to investigate which of the 3 factors should be selected in the model by using a method similar to backward selection approach. The following models are considered. So we have model underscore P2 where gender is removed from model P. Then we have removal of gender and pre-existing conditions. Then we have gender, pre-existing condition and region has been removed from model P. Okay. Then compare the values of the AI keys information number criteria for, that is our AIC number, for the 4 models. These are the 4 models. Comment on your answer in part 3 and then comment on the differences between the processes in part 3 and the full backward selection. So let's talk about full backward. Okay, we'll talk about that later on. Let's first make these. So for part 2 we are just removing the gender, so everything else remains same. I've just removed the gender part. Then the next one, again we are removing the gender and pre-existing condition, and then we are removing gender, pre-existing condition as well as region. So this way we have created our 3 new models. Calculate the AIC. So model P AIC is 2252.4. Model P2 AIC is slightly better. Model 3 AIC is much better, actually much worse. It is 2429, and model P4 AIC is definitely much worse. So clearly our model P2 is better than any of these other models. So that is what we will be writing in the comment. AIC of the model P2 is smallest, hence it is the best model among these 4. What's the difference between the backward selection and what we are doing here? Now backward selection stops when AIC increases despite reducing a parameter. Here it was not the case. So here, even after reducing a parameter and our AIC increases, we did not stop. In backward selection we will stop and we'll say this is our best model in this particular backward selection. Or we might then go and add that parameter again and then reduce some other parameter to figure out whether we have a better model here. So that is also, you can write that in backward selection we will be reducing all the parameters one by one to figure out which parameter is affecting the most in terms of AIC. Whereas here we reduced only one parameter and went to the other. For the last part, the modeler suggests refining the fitted GLM model by also including the interactions between the variables age, region, and pre-existing health condition. So now age, region, and pre-existing health condition, they're saying interactions between. So basically we are assuming that all possible interactions. So I will take a star model between these and only gender is left here. So plus gender. Then they are saying fit an appropriate model to include the interactions between the variable this. Justify whether the refined model in part 5a improves the model underscore p fitted in part 2a. Comment on whether any of the interactions are significantly associated with the claim number. So for part 5, we'll just run this. So what I have taken is I have taken the star model between these three and then added just the gender. So our AIC is definitely better than any of these models. Correct. So clearly we have a better model when we are taking star model, or you can say all the interaction between age, region, and factor. Now let's look at the p-values of these. Okay, so you can see age and region, the p-value. Okay, I'll just make it bigger. So in any of these, the p-value does not seem very small. Rather, all of them are greater than 1%. You can, if you just actually see the summary, it might be a little bit easier for us to write. I just take summary of this. Okay. Here, just by looking at these stars, you can tell that none of them are significant except for this one, and this is also not very significant. Let's see our last question, question number 5. An analyst collected samples of the prices of 25 one-bedroom flat in each of the 2 different cities. The data from these 2 samples are saved in the file onebedflat.rdata. After loading the rdata into R using the command this, the data frame one bed flat with its variable listed below will be available. So these two, it is assumed that the 2 samples come from normal population with equal variances. Calculate the approximate test statistic for the hypothesis of equal means in the 2 corresponding populations using these data. Test at a 1% significance level whether the mean flat prices are the same in the 2 cities against the alternative that they are different based on your answer in part 1. So let's just load up the data first. Open with RStudio. Yes, and here is our data. Then test, we have our t.test with variance dot equal as true. We'll take the test statistic of that. So this becomes our test statistic. Then for the second part, we'll take the p-value. So here we get our p-value, that is very small, 10 raised to minus 7. So clearly at 1% level, we have sufficient evidence to reject H0. The mean flat prices are different in the 2 cities. I have also written what our hypothesis is. That is not what they have asked, but it's very important for us to understand. The standard assumptions for a 2-sided test of the hypothesis of equal means in 2 populations are that the populations A1 follow normal distributions and A2 have equal variances. The analyst suspects that those assumptions may not be satisfied, and they are therefore interested in learning about the true significance level for such tests when assumptions A1, A2 do not necessarily hold. With 2 independent samples given a particular choice of a significance level alpha, the true significance level for a 2-sided test of the hypothesis of equal means can be calculated like this. So they have given us a formula to calculate our true alpha, where the critical point is the alpha by 2 quantile of the appropriate distribution. The estimate of the true significant level of the of this two-sided test, when the chosen level of the significance is alpha is equals to 0.1, can be computed using the R Monte Carlo simulation code provided below. So in this case, they have even provided us the code. We don't have to write this code. Note that the code provided above lacks the best practice of including appropriate comments. We have to just write down the comments. What does this actually mean? Explain the provided code by placing the comments after each hashtag sign in the code. So for that, we'll say set.seed is nothing but set the starting number for the random values. Then here we are taking our for loop. So creating a loop to run n times. Then here we have taken two samples from standard normal distribution. So two samples of size n and m from standard normal distribution. Then this is creating our test statistic. Okay. So test statistic for the assumed test. So our assumed test is xy and variance dot equal. Then the degree of freedom of that particular test. And here in this case we are checking if our absolute value of test statistic is greater than or equal to the quantile value that we have taken into account. So checking if the TS is greater than the critical value, right? And if it is greater, then we are registering it into this number. So increment if the sample is rejected. So this gives us nothing but if the sample is going to be rejected. So therefore alpha is the probability where our sample must be rejected. So this increment is number of times the sample is rejected. So alpha would be number of rejections divided by total number of time we are taking this particular experiment. This gives us estimate of true significant level. For the fourth part, they say estimate the true significance level by using the code provided above when the two populations are from a standard normal distribution. You just have to run the code that they have given us and just give the final answer. That's it. Estimate the true significance level by adjusting the code provided above to reflect the following pairs of the population. Now we have to again use the above code but do some changes. First change would be the first population is from a standard normal distribution and the second population is from a normal distribution with mean 0 and the standard deviation 10. So we are just changing the not normality but standard normality of one of the distribution. And in the B part, the first population, so this you can say the variance is not equal in this particular case, and the first population is from the normal distribution with mean 10 and the standard deviation as 2, and the second population is from exponential distribution with mean 10. So this is testing the normality. So here we were testing the variance being equal, and here we are testing whether there is the normality is same or not. So for part 4, we'll just run this code, exactly the same code that they have given in the question. I've just copied and pasted it here and I've just run it and I'm getting my alpha being 0.099. Then for the next one, we'll do the same thing. We'll just run the code with set.seed as well. The only difference we'll do is change this part. Okay. So normal distribution, we are just changing the standard deviation from 1 to standard deviation of 10. So this way, when we change the normality, our alpha slightly changes. It's not a big change. It's just 10.9%. And in the B part, we are changing the distribution. So here we have changed the normality of that particular distribution. And our alpha changes, you might say significantly here. Okay, 12.8%. So for the comment, we'll say the estimates increases as the sample deviates from standard normal distribution. As the sample deviates from the standard normal distribution but are still normal, the difference in the significance level is almost negligible. But when the sample changes to exponential distribution, the significance level increases, hence increasing the type 1 error. Alpha is nothing but type 1 error. This shows if the sample deviates from normality, the type 1 error increases for 2 sample t-test. we had to show that at least we need normality. You can definitely say that if we change the variance, still our type 1 error increased. So that is also not a good thing. So in this particular case, we need to take normal distribution as well as equal variance. But equal variance can still be avoided, but we need the samples from normal distribution. That would be very important. That is what they were trying to say here, or they were trying to expect us to say here. Now, although the questions were a little bit different from what we usually see, but they were pretty straightforward. And they knew that we'll be confused at least while writing the comments, and therefore they gave our question number 4 and question number 5 not too much variations. If you figured out the first equation in question number 4, we just had to use that and repeat and change a few values again and again. And similarly in question number 5, they literally gave us the whole code for last, I think, 3 or 4 parts. So we did not have to spend a lot of time to write those codes, but we had to spend time to write the conclusion that we can come out from those particular codes. If you found this video helpful, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.